When kids of the 90s look back on their childhoods, they might think of a lot of things, like the Pokemon anime, Cartoon Fridays on Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon cartoons, Game Boys. Sure, those are all valid things that might pop into your head when you think of the 90s. If you're not European, but if you are, one of the things that marked the 90s more than anything here in Europe was Hugo. In the European 90s, there were no shows like it. It had a fresh concept, it didn't try to be something it was not, it was just a funny thing to watch and all of us could be a part of it. So let's learn what Hugo was and even look back at it at the same time. Hugo was a game franchise made by the Danish company ITE, formerly known as Silver Rock Productions. The idea to create the franchise was made with the intent of making an entertaining and interactive game, as well as a TV show for kids of the ages of 4 to 14 years old. Kids could call to play, but usually only 4 contestants would be allowed to play. And so, in September 1990, Hugo was born and licensed for more than 40 countries. Hugo follows the story of the titular character Hugo, living in a forest in the region of Scandinavia, hence the reason why he is a troll, with his wife Hugelina and his kids Rit and Ruth. The antagonist of the franchise is a witch named Scylla, which I know as Maldiva. She needs Hugelina and the kids in order to stay young and pretty forever. She takes the kids up to her domain called the Skull's Cave, encages them, touches them, and stays young and hot forever. It is actually working. So Hugo has to go save his family, driven by the force of love. To get there, Hugo has to follow one of the many paths that will lead them there, collecting bags full of gold and avoiding traps set up by Scylla, and each of these paths are a minigame that you have to complete. So let's dive right into all of them, shall we? The first ever made game, which ironically does not follow the general standard that I just talked about, has Hugo running through a mine, collecting gold rocks, and avoiding explosives. After that, Hugo has to go through a bridge filled with holes that are extremely hard to avoid, and then Hugo has to pick 3 doors, one of them has treasure, while 2 have a sinister looking mine worker that will pull a lever and end the game for you. You can see that this one doesn't follow the regular formula of Hugo. It feels like this one was made as a prototype. Technically, the first ever made game was the forest game, which is the most basic thing you can play. It's not a hard game, but requires you to pay attention. All you have to do is jump, crawl, and not be startled by a bolt of lightning that Scylla unleashes and does literally nothing. The airplane game was always one of the hardest. Hugo has to fly and parachute to Skull's Cave. You have to fly with a very vague idea of where you have to go. There is also a gas tank, so once it's empty, you lose. Every time you use the map, you lose points, so you have to check that too. It's a game that requires a lot of balance. The train game is another easy game. All you have to do is stay away from the trains and move to the sidetrack in order to collect points. And there is a map to the side, so I really can't see how can anyone lose this. The mountain game is one of Hugo's most popular games. It basically consists of Hugo going up a mountain that feels flat to me, then catapulting up with a plunger. The only challenge here is collecting your points and timing your jumps. There is also a time limit, but I doubt anyone ever saw what happened if you wasted it. But because I like to make complete videos, Hugo gets hit by a 1000 kilo anvil. Moving on, we reach the ice cave game. Hugo finds a secret path to Skull's Cave. Hugo jumps barefoot into up and down ice pillars, trying to collect the combination that will open the door. It's a little more creative than the previous games, but in any case, it's just as easy. There's also the lumberjacking game, in which Hugo has to surf down a river on logs while avoiding falling in the water. The thing about this game is that sometimes your timing will be off, and you will fall in the water. Even if you time it right, sometimes the game glitches and sends you into a dive. Scylla appears at the middle of the game, launching a light ball into us, but nothing really happens. Following that, it's a scuba diving game. It's another standard game, but also one of my faves. I just love water. All you have to do is swim through the river, avoiding fishes, crabs, and octopuses, while also keeping a lookout for air supply. The skating game is another that you have to time right, and the controls kind of feel lagging in this game. But look, Hugo's using a cap on this one. Yay! Up next is one of the fastest games, which is the snowboarding game. Hugo slides down a snowy mountain through various paths, which some are more steep than others. In the red paths, the avalanche catches you, but if you go through the green path, you will be alright. All the while avoiding an avalanche set up by Scylla to chase us, and snowballs. This was always one of my favorites. The next game is the hot air balloon, which is the hardest game Hugo has, period. Hugo has to fly his air balloon through an area that doesn't feel proper for a hot air balloon, while avoiding rock slides, spikes, and many other things. And then Hugo has to ascend through a tight path and open his way with explosive pine cones. The reason why this game is hard is because of the necessity of balancing knees and the very short margin for error you have. You can't go high because you will eventually crash, but if you go too low, you will eventually fall. When I was 16, it took me a few days for me to complete this game. Enough said. Then comes the darkest of all games, which is the Dolmen Cave. Hugo has to make his way through an underground path of Scylla's domain, all the while avoiding water that will eventually drown Hugo if he stays there too long. I wonder what are those ropes for? I will say this though, this game has the most controls, which made a lot of kids playing this game really confused, making it one of my favorites. The motorcycling game is a good one because the motorcycle is just so smooth when it changes path. It's one of the few games that has a 3D world and it kinda works. Here Hugo has to avoid rocks, running out of fuel, and avoiding running against a goat. But it's one of the easiest nonetheless. Now we have one of the scariest games, which is the rock climbing game. Hugo has to rock climb to Skull's Cave, avoiding fire-spitting gargoyles, lava rocks, and dynamites. What scares me is the fact that Scylla is coming and the sound of an ambulance can be heard in the back. Making the completion of this game such a relief. I feel like I could conquer the world for a split second just by playing this. Up next is the bobsleigh game. Kinda like the forest game, this one isn't hard. Once you know what arrow you have to press, just smash until you eventually finish the game. But hey, there is a bonus game, which is a snowball fight with a beaver that we've been seeing throughout this whole franchise. Every time you hit him, you get 100 points. And if you thought that Hugo would stop there, then you would be dead wrong. From this point on, the game starts looking less creative and poorly designed, indicating that we are reaching the end. Hugo also goes parachuting, avoiding clouds, bombs, and crazy birds. This always puts me in mind of the airplane game. It's kind of a cheap knockoff of the latter. You know, it's kind of the Kangaskhan to the Tauros in Generation 1 of Pokemon. Up next is a trekking game. Hugo has to walk down a mountainous path and reach Skull's Cave, all the while avoiding a very slow boulder that is following us, while remembering a combination to open the gate. This one is different because we get to play as Hugo from the front. Also, there aren't many things here to make you lose lives. If you don't touch lava pits or let the boulder crush you, you will be fine. But I have to say though, this one is a very tranquil game. Whenever the boulder isn't following you, you can hear the birds in the surroundings. Wood jumping sees Hugo crossing a gorge by hopping across flat-topped tree trunks and an oddly placed bridge, avoiding dynamite, beavers, and steel traps. On the edge of the track are howls and frogs, which you must remember. I have to say, this is my least favorite game, purely on the lack of originality. And then there's a swamp game, which is kinda similar to the latter. Hugo has to cross a swamp to reach Scylla's lair, avoiding mud holes and colonies of bats before solving a test. I also don't like this one because of how slow the game moves, and yet still seems like the game gives you no space to time your jumps. But wait, Hugo's outfit here is blue! Yay! Hugo also rides a minecart, ducking wood boards, choosing the right path, and not much else. This one has a theme that only plays for the first 15 seconds, then ends. The final game of the original series is the Wild River game. Hugo rides a wild river in a barrel, avoiding whatever kind of thing that Scylla throws at him, much like the snowboarding game. Just running this script felt like I was repeating myself. No wonder no one really plays Hugo anymore. It's not the best thing to sit down and play. It's essentially 3 minigames with a diverse coat of paint. There you have your side-scrolling game, the labyrinth type of game, and avoiding obstacle kind of game. Replaying these with adult eyes, I've noticed that not many of these games are original. Unfortunately, Hugo did not manage to keep itself in contention because the creators never really upgraded like all the other popular franchises at the time, like Mario, Sonic, and Pokemon. It's not to say that Hugo as a franchise did not try to be bold. By the end of the 90s, ITE made a revamp to the franchise with Hugo and the Volcano Island. This included popular games such as the Hugo game, Ostrich game, a platformer type of game that I've never been able to complete, and even a revamped version of the minecart game. There are lots of other games inside this franchise, like Hugo the Evil Mirror, Hugo Backasum or Kart Racer, and Agent Hugo. But regardless of their efforts, ITE did not manage to keep the franchise afloat, and Hugo faded away into obscurity as time went on. Hugo did come back to prominence in 2012 with some mobile apps. At one point, we even saw him do a duet with Cristiano Ronaldo in a Subway Surfers ripoff. It's actually surprising how can such a simple concept manage to gather so much commercial success. Nowadays, this game cannot compete with the modern day fun houses. But regardless of what happened to make this such a commercial success, we can always look back on it and have an incredible nostalgia reviewing it. And maybe Hugo will rise again in popularity with the release of the CGI film Hugo's Worst Comeback. Seriously, what the hell is taking them so long? Guess it's just another matter of time.